All right, we are good. We are starting. So we are in the 3 weeks, as we discussed last week. These are the 3 weeks starting from last Thursday. Last Thursday was a fast day, commemorating in the times of the first temple, when the Babylonians, after a 3.5 year siege on Jerusalem, burst through the walls. And 3 weeks later, on the ninth of Av, the ninth day of the Hebrew month of Av, they actually began burning the temple. And precisely the same day, some 490 years later, the Romans burnt the second temple. So from last Thursday for the next 3 weeks until the 9th of Av, this is what we call the 3 week, a time when we focus not as much on the destruction as on the construction. We focus on the rebuilding of the temple. We focus on redemption. The Lubavitcher Rebbe instituted many, many years ago that every day we should learn the laws of redemption. So we really, it's not like oh, negative, we're so sad time. It's a like, all right, there was a destruction. We need a construction. We need to rebuild. We need a temple, and let's make it happen. So, what we focused on last week was the idea of love for one another. Last week, we specifically actually spoke in terms of a husband and wife relationship, but today we'll globalize it a little more. And the reason why we did so is because we said the first temple was destroyed for idolatry, adultery, and murder. And after 70 years, that sin was cleansed. And the second temple was destroyed for baseless hatred. And that took some 1900 years to be cleansed. And we were told that if it was destroyed for baseless hatred, rebuild it with baseless love. It was destroyed for hatred, rebuild it with. Now the Rebbe says that we have finished this cleansing job. That took some 1900 plus years to do. Way too long. But now we still need to focus on baseless love because that's living Mashiach. And the times of redemption will all have this free love for each other. So if we're focused on construction and building, then we want to have this love. So today I wanted to actually bring in a classical Hasidic discourse of the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, who's referred to as Rebbe Rashab. It's entitled Heichaltzu. And this focuses on this theme of baseless hatred, baseless love, and actually in connection to this week's Torah portion. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is literally living with the times. This is the Torah portion of this week. And this is the theme of these 3 weeks. So like we got it all in one. So this is amazing. So what's the Torah portion discussing that connects to this Hasidic discourse? So in this week's Torah portion, which is the last two, it's actually a combined Torah portion. We have two in one Sabbath and one Shabbos. The last two of the fourth book of Torah, the book of Numbers, Bamidbar. And in this portion, we discuss, and was literally what we're just reading today, the war against a nation, a specific nation. Now, again, that theme has been Sunday's portion, Monday's portion. We've been discussing this nation that we had to fight and destroy. And the nation is called Midian. And the reason why the Jews in the desert went out to war against Midian is because Midian was a nation that wanted to destroy us. And how could they destroy us? How can you destroy a nation that's God's chosen nation, that God is showing so much favor to, right? We're in the desert. We're drinking the water from the well of Miriam, eating the manna, the food from heaven, surrounded by the clouds, leading a completely miraculous life within the natural for 40 years. So how do the Midianites think they could destroy us? They're going to come out and fight. God's going to protect us. They knew that. So they had a very clever idea, or this very, very evil person, the prophet of the non-Jews, whose name was Bilam, gave them this very evil idea. And he said, listen, if you try to fight them, you'll never win. But I have an idea for you. Their God hates sin, especially he hates idolatry and immoral conduct like adultery. So if you get them to sin, their God will take care of them. And unfortunately, he was right. And that is exactly what happened. So these were two nations, Midian and Moab, that joined together to try to destroy us. Previously, like 2 Torah portions ago, Moab hired this prophet, Bilam, to curse us. God didn't let. We only got blessings and prophecies about redemption from this very, very evil, horrible person who continued being an evil, horrible person, because then he said, well, listen, God wouldn't let me curse them, but I got a good idea. Get them to sin, and then God will take care of them. So that's what they did. They set up this whole situation on the road that they knew that the Jews would be traveling. And they had a line of like booths, like shops, like, you're traveling. Oh, you want to purchase something. And they had in each shop like a older looking woman and a young, beautiful woman. And if women came into the shop, the older woman was serving them. Okay, the shop's very safe. Nothing here is going to tempt the men. But if men came in, instead of the old woman, this beautiful young woman was serving them and behaving very inappropriately and basically seducing the men. And then at that moment of the seduction, it's like, wait, first we got to serve this idol first. So managed to bring them to sin in the most horrible ways. And as this evil prophet of the non-Jews said, God punished them. And there was a plague, and 24,000 Jews died, primarily from one tribe. Almost all of the 24,000 was from one tribe, because basically almost all the sinners were from this one tribe of Shimon, and 24,000 Jews died. Afterwards, God said, okay, listen, you got to go take revenge against this nation of Midian that did this to you. I mean, in other words, the sinners died from the plague. The rest of the Jews turned to God and were forgiven, and the plague was stopped. But we've got to take revenge from this nation that wanted to destroy you, nation of Midian. So there was a very holy war, and it wasn't like a regular war where you try to take as many soldiers as you can. No, it's limited. We're only taking 1,000 from each tribe, meaning there were 600,000 men, but only 12,000 went out to war, because this was a God war. We don't need numbers. This is pure God. And the Jews completely vanquished and destroyed this nation. So that was in the Torah portion. If you were reading along the Torah portion of the days, you would have read it yesterday and today. So on this portion, on this storyline, which I don't mean a story is non-true, but on the instance that happened that the Torah is discussing, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe explains spiritually what's going on, what's the horrors of this nation of Midian. So before I explain that, anyone have any questions on anything I said so far?
Is the story Pinchas part of it?
So, yes. So 2 Torah portions ago, Balak, then Pinchas, then Matos Maseh. The Torah portion of Balak, the entire story is the nation of Moab, led by this king Balak, hiring Bilam, this prophet of the nations, because God said, I have to give them a prophet. Otherwise, they'll say, well, of course the Jews listen to you and we don't. They have prophets. We don't. So he said, I'll give you a prophet and you'll see he'll bring you to sin. And that's exactly what happened, because the nations of the world, since the time of the Great Flood, were not promiscuous, because they knew that's what caused the Great Flood. I mean, a few other transgressions also caused the Great Flood. But they understood that one of the big transgressions was the promiscuity. So therefore, they were careful to a certain degree. And Bilam destroyed this because he said, go, make your daughters like these, so to speak, prostitutes, to bring the nation to sin. So the whole bulk, like 95% of the Torah portion of Balak, is this whole story with Bilam, and Balak bringing him to curse the Jews, and 3 times him blessing the Jews, and then him having the most beautiful prophecies that we have in the 5 books on Mashiach. At the very end, like literally the last verses, it suddenly speaks about this plague and this fight going on, and this Midianite princess who this prince of Shimon has, and going to Moses, and what's going on. And what was going on was exactly what I'm saying, that Bilam said, okay, we couldn't get them this way, but get them to sin and God will take care of them. The nations had their daughters do these acts I said to bring the nation to sin. And therefore there's this plague. And when Pinchas goes and he kills Cosbi and Zimri, the prince of the nation of Shimon, that primarily Shimon was the tribe sinning, with this Midianite princess Cosbi, because if literally it is in the act itself, at that point, someone is allowed to kill them. And Pinchas did so, and there were like 10 different miracles that happened to make this impossible thing happen of actually literally killing them in the act. Many, many miracles God did. That was the end of the portion of Balaam. Therefore, the next Torah portion, Pinchas, is God rewarding Pinchas and making him a priest. Because even though Pinchas is from the priestly family, he was born when, at that point, the only ones that were the priests were Aaron, his 4 sons, and any future grandchildren. But Pinchas was already born, so he wasn't a priest. God made him a priest now in reward for what he did. That was the Torah portion of Pinchas. The next Torah portion, which is our Torah portion this week, is Matos and Maseh. In the beginning of Matos, yesterday's portion, today's portion is what I just recounted to you of the Jews going out to destroy Midian. And because Pinchas was the one that started or began this salvation of God, he was actually the priest that went out to war. Usually it would be his father, the high priest at that time, Elazar. But since Pinchas was the one that began the salvation by stopping the plague through his killing of Cosbi and Zimri, he was actually the one that led the Jews to war. Okay, so that's what's in the Torah portion. What is going on spiritually? Because that's what we want to know. And that's why I'm saying this Torah portion, which is literally the Torah portion, is actually also literally the energy of these 3 weeks. So the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe explains that the nation of Midian, this nation that the Jews were destroying in our portion of this week, is actually, in a sense, the most evil nation there is. Meaning the Jews are going to go to enter Israel. In Israel, there are 7 nations that they're commanded to destroy. And those 7 nations each represent a certain evil spiritual energy. But Midian's worse, because Midian represents the core evil, while these other nations represent certain aspects of evil, like evil giving, evil withholding, evil compassion. But Midian is the core. The word Midian, the name Midian, the root of that name Midian is the word Madon. Midian, Madon. Madon means conflict, arguments. This is hatred, baseless hatred. And that is the core evil, because when there's godliness, there's unity. Okay, so this is like the key point. There's a lot of spiritually deep concepts and lots of Kabbalistic ideas. I'm not giving that over, really. I'm going to the basic point, and then we want to apply it in our own service of God, our own lives. But Midian, Madon, evil is arguments, is conflicts, is hatred. And on the side of godliness, it's unity. It's oneness. It's getting along. This is, in a sense, the primary difference between godliness and evil. If there's godliness, there's unity. If there's evil, there's separation, there's division, there's divisiveness, there's fighting, there's horrible energy between people. All of that stuff, evil. On the good side, unity and love. We see this actually very classically in the meeting that occurred between Yaakov, Jacob, and Esav after Jacob finished his 20 years in the house of Lavan. And then guess who he gets to meet on the road? His dear brother Esav, that came with 400 men to fight him and slaughter him. But God turned all that around. But so here we have this Yaakov coming with his family, and we have Esav coming with his family and 400 fighters to destroy the family of Yaakov. So the 400 men slip away, and I'm not going into all the things that happen, all the ways God protected us. But when the verse is talking about these 2 families, Yaakov, Jacob's, and Esav's, when it's talking about Jacob, about Yaakov, when Yaakov was saying, he's good, Esav was like, oh, I want to give you this, I want to give you this, I want to give you this. Yaakov was saying, I'm good. Yesh li kol, which means I have all my needs. When Esav is talking, he says something very similar but different. Jacob said, yesh li, I have, kol, all I need. Esav says, yesh li, I have, same introductory words, rav, I have a lot. Meaning Jacob, representing godliness, is like, I'm fine, I'm good. Whatever I have is good. I don't have any more needs. I'm good. And Esav is saying, oh, I have a lot. Not like I'm good and my needs are met, but I have a lot. I need a lot. And when we're talking about the 2 families, at this point, actually, Jacob's family was 70 people. He has 4 wives and many sons, some daughters. Esav had 6 people in his family. Jacob had 70. When the verse talks of the family of Jacob, it says 70 soul in the singular. When it talks of the family of Esau, he has 6 souls in the plural, meaning by Jacob, there's 70 of them, but they were godly. So they were united. They were one family, 70 people, but it's soul because they're one. And by Esau, representing the forces of evil, as he and his family definitely were, there's 6 of them. And it's in the plural. Well, they were family. They were all in it together. Well, they were combined with their evil hatred of Jacob. And that way they were united. But within each other, there was no unity either. It's 6 separate, distinct entities. Because on the side of evil, there's always going to be this divisiveness. There's always going to be this separation. Kabbalistically, this evil energy comes from a spiritual realm that, in a sense, preceded our spiritual reality. Our spiritual reality is called the reality of tikkun, Kabbalistically, which means rectification. The reality that preceded that is called the reality of tohu, which comes from the 2nd verse of the entire Torah, of the entire scriptures, where it speaks of tohu, of confusion. And in this reality of confusion, again, this is not a physical reality, this is pure spirituality, but all the different godly energies, so to speak, can't stand each other. I mean, put in the very human terms, these are godly energies, but they can't bond, they can't fuse, they can't become one. And because they couldn't bond and fuse, there was the shattering of the vessels. The godly energies ascended and the vessels shattered and the shards fell down into our reality. This is all, does not mean physical. This is all Kabbalistic, metaphysical concepts. But this shattering of the vessels, because these energies could not bond and fuse, because each one didn't have the ability to become with another, this is the source of separation, of the division of evil, as embodied by this nation called Midian. This is all Kabbalistic and spiritual, but this is very practical in terms of our lives. I'm saying especially in terms of these 3 weeks, but really in terms of every day of our life. Before I get into the practical application, which is probably very obvious, does anyone have any questions on what I just explained? Because it was maybe a little more spiritual and Kabbalistic than we normally discuss here. Anyone have any questions on it? Any thoughts? So what does this mean in us? What does this mean in our world? What it means in our reality is that just as we're saying this nation of Midian is the core evil. Remember, there are 7 nations they're going to go into Israel and conquer. And they're commanded to wipe out those 7 nations because every nation is incredibly evil. But it's an aspect of evil. It's the evil loves and the evil strengths and the evil this and the evil that. But this nation, Midian, is the core of evil. This is the foundational energy of evil: separation, arguments, fighting, division among godly energies or people. So that's how it is with us. When there's a lack of unity among people, when there's a hatred, a negative feeling, arguments, contention, strife, that's not a detail. That's a core foundation of all evil. Now, when we say baseless hatred, right, because that's the term we use for the sin the Jews had that caused the destruction of the Second Temple, and we still haven't rebuilt it, which means on some level we're still dealing with it, even though the Lubavitcher Rebbe did say, some 35 some years ago, we've rectified it finally after 1900 years plus. But baseless hatred means, as we touched on last week, that it's not that a person harmed you. It's not a person opposes you in a certain area, because that's not baseless hatred. That's hatred, which is wrong, but for a reason. I'm hating him because he, I'm a shoemaker and he started another shoemaking store on my block, I whatever. I was bidding on this house and he came and he cut me out, and so I've got a reason. It's not good. It's not acceptable. I have bad feelings for people that do that to you, but it does start with a reason. Someone harmed you in a certain way, or at least in your perspective harmed you. That's not baseless hatred. If someone's opposing you and you have anger and you have hatred and you fight them, all of which are wrong and bad, it's not baseless hatred. Midian, this nation that we're talking about in this week's Torah portion, this is the source of baseless hatred, which means you can't stand them, even if you know nothing about them, even if you don't have yet any dealings with them. You can't have a good feeling for them, have positivity for them. For sure, you can't bond with them. You just hate them before he even gives you a reason, or before any reason happened to justify or to create any negative feelings. Now, generally what people do once they have this negative feeling is they make up reasons and justifications because we don't want to feel so stupid that we hate someone for no reason. But it's false. That's not why. It's coming from the baseless hatred, and then the reasons follow. So why would we be like this? Why would a person have such negative feelings for another person before they even harm you? What's the root energy going on here? And it's not like this abstract, philosophical, theological question. This is reality, because the temple got destroyed over 1900 years. And it wasn't rebuilt over the 1900 years because we hadn't rectified this sin. Now, I'm saying, the Lubavitcher is saying maybe in like 1990 or 91 or 92, we finally done it. We don't have the temple. Right. Should happen because we've done it. And now let's have baseless love, not to rectify, but because that's living redemption, because by redemption, there'll be baseless love. But the fact that it took us over 1900 years to rectify this means this is very much, unfortunately, reality. It might sound like, whoa, that's intense, and that doesn't happen. Maybe it happened 1900 years ago. No, if it happened 1900 years ago and not since, we would have been back in Jerusalem a long time ago. So what's the root of this feeling? Why do people feel this way?
Ego.
Revenge.
Revenge. Someone said jealousy, I think. Ego. Rivka said, yeah. It starts off with ego, and then the jealousy and the revenge and all those horrible traits flow. The core of this issue, which we're saying is core, all boils down to ego. Ego, from which flows hatred, and then jealousy and revenge and harm and greed and pride, anger, destruction. It's all coming from this evil of this baseless hatred, which is a direct manifestation of ego. So now we understand why it took 1900 years, because ego, we understand. Ego is part of the reality of man. Ego is something we all work on. Some of us need to work on it more. Some of us need to work on it less because we've got other problems. But ego is the core trait, because ego is exactly this issue. Ego is, there's no space for anyone else. So we can't stand other people because they minimize us, meaning some people we like because they're good appendages for us, because they're useful for us. But some people, the rest of the people we don't like, if we think they're minimizing our space. In other words, it all revolves around what's beneficial for me, what harms me, what's good for me, what's bad for me, me. Like, of course, we see in our generation where we're so blatant about it. It's the iPhone and the iPad and the I this and the I that. Like we're not even embarrassed anymore. You know, it's like totally appropriate to show how self-absorbed we are. That's this exact trait that the Jews are fighting in this Torah portion thousands of years ago. The ego is making anyone else in the world your opponent. In other words, by their very being, they're your competition. So some people aren't your competition. They're servile to you. They help you. They're accessories, they're appendages. You're okay with them because it's still all an extension of your ego. And some people are not. And you don't want them. They're minimizing your space. They're taking away the attention. They're taking away the power. They might do some things better than you even. They're your competition. That's where this hatred comes. So what happens on the side of godliness? So if on the side of evil, the essence core trait that defines all evil in a sense is ego, what would in a parallel way, be the most core trait to define godliness?
Nullification of yourself.
Nullification, exactly. Nullification. Ego is a really hard trait to overcome. I'm sure we all know that. And nullification might be a really hard trait to attain. We probably know that as well. Because anything very valuable generally is hard. If it wasn't so hard, it might not be as valuable. If it wasn't as valuable, it might not be as hard. Nullification is the main trait. And in nullification, you make space for other people. You accept others. You help others. You join with others. You put others in front of yourself. I was reading yesterday, not really reading, this surfaced, so to speak, yesterday, this Holocaust novel. I mean, true, like autobiography. I read years and years and years ago. So I was like sort of, reading, flipping through the pages last night. And there was one incident this person recorded, and I thought it was like almost interesting, but it's sort of this point. So this is the autobiography of a couple that, thank God, they survived. Miraculously, they and all their 3 children survived. So it's amazing. A lot of course, hand of God. So at one point in the story, I'm just telling you they survived, so you shouldn't be concerned what I'm going to say. But so the husband, the man he got caught, he got put in a camp, he escaped. He's trying to make his way back now to his wife. This is all happening in France. He's in Paris, and he doesn't know what to do with himself because at night, there's this wonderful non-Jew who has a little hotel inn that lets him sleep there at night. But he says he can't be there by day. It'd be too dangerous for him and for him. So by day, he's supposed to wander the streets of Paris. And then at night, he could come to and have a meal and a bed, which is amazing of this person risking his life for this complete stranger. But the streets of Paris were not very safe because what the Nazis would do, at least in Paris, is they would make these random checks, and they would literally stop a group of people on the street, a group of men, and just tell them to pull down their pants, because then they would see quickly if anyone's circumcised. And those days, if you were circumcised, you were a Jew. So this was very terrifying to him, because if he ever got caught, that would be the end of him. And whatever, once he almost got caught. So he was really scared. He was trying to think, what can I do? Where can I be by day that I'll be safe? And he knew there was, strangely enough, a group of Jews that was still in Paris, a small group of artisans that were working for the Nazis. So they hadn't killed them yet or sent them to Auschwitz because they were working for the Nazis. And he knew where they were. And he did something that sounds pretty crazy, but he felt so desperate. He went into this place, this workshop where these artisans were making all these, high-level items for the Nazis, which is why they let them survive, let them live. I don't know what happened to them at the end of the war, but they were living then. And he came in and he begged them. He said, I'm a Jew and I have nowhere to hide. Can I be here with you? Can I be part of your group by day so they won't get me? If I'm on the streets, they'll get me. And they wouldn't. The group was terrified. And they felt horrible. And they were like, oh, here, we could give you money. He said, no, I don't need money. I need protection. But they wouldn't do it. And he writes, his wife wrote this. He had already passed away when this book was written. But he's telling, his story to his wife, that he was so shocked. He was so hurt. He couldn't understand how these people wouldn't protect him. Like a Jew won't protect a Jew. So when I'm reading this, I'm thinking, it makes sense, like they would have endangered themselves. For sure, the Nazis would know how many people there are and where they're going to hide him. Like, you understand why these people didn't take him in. But from his head, and this is after years of war and years of, he was in like 6 or 7 different camps that each one he miraculously got out of. Even after all these experiences, he still had such a strong sense of a Jew wouldn't help a Jew. A Jew wouldn't protect a Jew. Like, isn't that what we do? And it was very amazing. It was very powerful to me reading that. And that is really this essence point of the side of godliness. Godliness is nullification, and nullification is unity. Nullification is you do for others. Nullification is you make space for someone else. You help someone else. You join with someone else. You do what you can to support someone else. And obviously, this is super important and therefore sometimes very difficult. And therefore, we probably all struggle with it on some level or another. So, this is really what I want to talk about in terms of the work of the 3 weeks. How do you achieve nullification? Or how do you achieve, if you have nullification, a greater nullification? What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? What do you think? How are you supposed to achieve this Jewish, godly, desired trait that would make you a person that has space for others, that loves others, that helps others, that cares for people? It's all flowing from this nullification. How do you get it?
Cyril,
Rivka?
just thinking that we kind of all know the taste of it in our relationship to our kids. Wouldn't you say that?
And that's a beautiful point. I can't say everyone. I totally see what you're saying. I will honestly say for some people, yes, their relationship with their kids is a lot of nullification, a lot of sacrifice. But for some people, the relationship with their kids could actually be an expression of their own ego, because it sort of depends on, again, you're coming from a place of ego, you're coming from a place of nullification. If you're coming from a place of ego, your children could be an extension of your ego. You're coming from a place of nullification, your children are a very strong, opportunity to have a lot of nullification. But I do understand what you're saying, because in a godly space, yes, that's very, very true. What Rivka's saying is, if you're in a godly space, you can taste what it feels like when you're with your children and giving them in that way. And she's right. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on how do we achieve nullification?
It's kind of natural for a person to think about himself, to worry about his life and all that. But at the same time, if we remember that there is a next world, and it's important for our soul to do good things here, to have a good place in the next world, that makes it maybe easier to have nullification here.
Maybe that could work for some people. Like right now, it's difficult, but it's the greatest investment in my eternal forever. So it's worth pushing. That makes sense. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? It's not an easy question because it's not an easy goal, but that is the Rebbe saying, the Rebbe meaning here, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, this most foundational core. We want to uproot the ego, which we all have on some level. We want to implant the nullification. We don't want to be sources of contention and divisiveness and strife. We want to be the energy of oneness and nurturing and love and acceptance and tolerance. So I think we all would agree it's a great goal. So Rivka said one thing that has truth, and Rachel's saying something else. Any other thoughts on how we could achieve this?
I have a thought.
Malky?
For example, there's like I guess there's could be situations that come up, and then knowing the only thing you can do is do your part, and know you did, I guess, you do your hishtadlus, and you did everything you could, and then really giving it over to God, and believing and trusting and recognizing there's no one greater than God, only Hashem, doing hishtadlus. And
so how do you reach what you're saying is great. My question is, how do you get to that point?
Saying it's tricky one. I mean, sounds is through trial and error.
Oh, okay. So that's what you're saying. What Malky's saying is know the goal and then keep trying to achieve it. And sometimes error means we fall on our face. And then we realize, no, we didn't do it right this time. And then we keep going and we keep self-correcting. And once we know where we want to be, we keep moving in that direction. Okay, that makes sense. That's a good answer. Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
We should try to align our own will with Hashem's will.
Yes, that is the nullification. And what I think, I was thinking about this also, obviously, while I prepared this today, and I was thinking about it, like, okay, what do what is the road? It's a great question I'm raising, but what is the road? And everyone's saying appropriate things. I think the more aware we are of God, which maybe was the direction Malki was going in, the more we're aware of God, the more we're naturally nullified. Now, that also matches what Rachel was saying. Rachel was saying in terms of if you're really focused that there's another world after this one, and that's the eternal world, and this is what we need to do, or like Rivka's saying now, being aligned with God's will. So that's sort of all circling around this point of being aware of God. If we're aware of God, we're nullified. And if we're more aware of God, we're more nullified. Now, why would this nullification lead to all these beautiful interpersonal traits? I think because if you're nullified, that means you're smaller. You're taking up less space. And then you can tolerate others because they're not stepping on you, because you're not all over the place. So you're not needing the whole center stage. You don't need to be the center of attention. You don't need that all the power or honor or money or success or climbing the corporate ladder, whatever it is. You don't need it to be me, 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 me. You're not taking up all that space. You're willing to let others share and even take sometimes big portions. You could work on a project and let someone else take the credit. It doesn't bother you. You don't need it. You're okay without it. When you're nullified, there's a lot of room for other people. So when you look at other people, you can look at other people with love and with kindness, with charity, with support, with help. You don't feel threatened. It's not a competition. You don't want what they have, and you're not scared that they're taking away what you have. And that's how all this positive love and good emotions can flow between people. When you're nullified, it's automatic. The more you're aware of God, the more you should be nullified. The more you should be nullified, the less space you take. The less space you take, the more there's room for other people in your life. And those other people might or might not be your husband, because maybe you take up a lot of space and that squashes him, or maybe he's an extension of your ego. Might or might not be your children, might or not be relatives, friends, colleagues, neighbors, all the people in your life. The more you're aware of God, the more you're nullified. The more you're nullified, the less space you take up. The less space you take up, the more there's room for others. And then you could be very generous and positive with others and help others and support others, because there's no threat. There's no competition. There's no struggle. You're not looking for what they have, and you don't feel they're looking for what you have. That's like a formula, so to speak, that we're saying here in terms of how to really engender the positive, which is really the godly, and minimize all the others. But of course, we're human. So it's not like, oh, okay, now I know exactly what to do. Great, good, done. No, obviously, it could be a lifetime of work. For some of us, it's a longer lifetime than others, because for some people, it's really, really, really hard to get to that point of the awareness of God and the nullification. Or for some people, they might have the awareness of God, but the nullification doesn't flow. Or you might have the nullification, but it doesn't reach the next point of relating it to other people. So there's a lot of steps. And we could all have those things that are difficult, but this is the vision. Like I think Malki was saying, we have the vision, we can walk toward it. Now, obviously, some people get to us more than others. Meaning, I'm sure we can all find situations where we're nullified and tolerant of so many people, except a few. You know, those few, like, they really get to us. All of our great self-control and beautiful development of character just falls apart. So what do we do about those situations? To be continued.